Donc, bonjour à tous. Pour ce début d'après-midi, nous allons parler d'écologie de la côte, côtière donc. Alors, je ne sais pas si vous êtes au courant de ce que c'est qu'une mangrove, mais on m'a demandé de vérifier. Alors, une mangrove, ce n'est pas qu'un endroit avec de la boue qui s'est trouvée, ce n'est pas qu'un endroit où il y a des moustiques qui piquent, des chenilles qui piquent, des termites qui piquent. C'est un endroit merveilleux, des choses assez passionnantes qui se passent. Et donc, c'est ce qu'on va voir avec 3 présentations. Donc, on va commencer par Christophe Proisy, qui est chercheur IRD et puis membre d'AMAP, Guyane, et qui va nous parler de comment on peut voir les variations du trait de côte avec l'étude des mangroves.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. So I am Christophe Proisy, researcher at IRD. I'm working at the AMAP laboratory. I am based in Guyane, in French Guiana. My expertise is on remescencing of mangrove forest, but also mangrove coast. So behind this presentation, of course, I'm not alone. So this work involves my colleagues from the CNRS and IFREMER from the LEEISA lab. So this presentation is about the role of mangrove for understanding and anticipating coastal changes. So it's not a CEBA project, it's not a presentation of result, it's just a presentation of my research vision. So I would like to thank you, the CEBA team, for the invitation to have this presentation. So first of all, I would like to tell you the story of the Amazon-influenced coast of French Guiana. You probably already know that we live on one of the most dynamic coasts of the world. This is actually also the world's longest muddy coast of the world, with 1,500 kilometers of mud on the near shore from the Amazon River to the Orinoco River. And the coastal, we have a very huge high instability on the coast, and this instability is induced by northwest shifting of giant mud banks. So this is the patatoid you see here, starting from the Cap Orange to the Orinoco, and all the mud banks are shifting in this direction. The main picture, the main things you have to keep in mind, when we have a mud bank, mangrove can colonize, can go seaward. But between each mud bank, we have an erosion phase, and mangrove can be eroded and can disappear sometimes completely. What is particularly interesting, we started to study over decades the change in mangrove shoreline fluctuation by analyzing, for example, the aerial photograph, IGN aerial photograph acquired in 1950. And what we recorded are exceptional rates of mangrove seaward progression reaching 500 meters per year, but also mangrove retreat exceptional rates, also 500 meters per year. So now I would like to illustrate what I'm trying to say. Here is a typical photograph of an erosion phase. Mangrove is destroyed. But mangrove trees are not destroyed by waves. Mangrove are falling down because mud is removed by wave. So it's very important to understand this phenomenon. And when we go to the inhabited shoreline, you have this typical and recurrent phenomenon. In the beach of Remire-Montjoly in 2011, we had erosion, and some houses were destroyed. And as well, in the north of French Guiana region, in the Mana regions, rice fields, started to be eroded, and now the rice culture completely stopped. At the opposite, when you have a mud bank presence is a synonym of coastal protection. And what we demonstrated already, and it is now published, when we have a mud bar is an elevation of a bar of elevated mud here. We have wave damping, and this allows a rapid consolidation behind of the mud bank. Okay, so this is a very large area of mud that becomes more and more consolidated. And as a consequence, we can observe sometimes a very, what we call an opportunistic colonization by Abyssinia germinans. Abyssinia germinans is the main dominant mangrove tree in French Guiana. Well, when I'm saying rapid, it means hundreds of hectares can be colonized over a few weeks. Okay, with a rapid growth also in the height, in the Z direction, with weights of growing weights of reaching between 2 meters to 4 meters per year. So the mud bank is rapidly transforming. And now I would like to illustrate what we got from a very simple remote sensing analysis, a multi-temporal analysis. So on the left of the slide, you have 2 spot images. So one in 1986, sorry. You see with the intense red color, new mangrove colonization. Maybe it's better with a point. So this is not so good on this screen. So here you have mangrove starting to colonize the bare mud banks here. And 9 years after, take a look on the spatial scale, you have a very large mangrove cover with trees reaching 20 meters high. So with a remote sensing satellite observation, we can follow the mangrove shoreline. And we did it since 1950 to obtain the animation you can see here. So from Brazil to Suriname, it's about 320 kilometers long. And you can, and from 1950 to 2010. First, we can see that mangrove can propagate up to 8 kilometers in the seaward direction. For example, in the Sinamari region, so not so far from Parakou. But also the very unique point in French Guiana, I will insist on this point, is when mangrove is completely destroyed, mangrove can reappear. So this point is unique in the world because elsewhere, when mangrove disappear, it's quite impossible to see mangrove reappearing. So all that makes the French Guiana coast a very unique region to study mangrove dynamics and coastal processes. So what I'm trying to do over the last years is to build modeling, multi-scale integrative modeling approach. So I don't have time to explain all the mechanisms. Keep in mind that we can use wave and current data and use this data to force a model, to force equations, and try to obtain, to retrieve what we observe with the remote sensing images, so all the dynamics of fluctuation of mangrove shoreline. And it works quite well. We can simulate both erosional and accretional phases, so we can simulate quite well mangrove shoreline fluctuation. And one of the first results from this is a confirmation that French Guiana is a wave-dominated coast. And this means that during December, from December to April, this is the period with the highest vulnerability to wave erosion. And second point, a better understanding of the geological processes, climatic processes, and ecological processes, we get, let's say, a mean coastal vulnerability index based on mangrove. Is it a solution? But I'm not sure, but it could be helpful to an early one on erosion waves, as published recently. So now it's time to conclude. I am in time. Yeah. So if you want to continue to live on the French Guiana coast, so I would say it's good to continue research on mangrove. So what I'm trying to do fits perfectly the IPCC 2022 recommendation in 3 points: understanding the responses of mangrove to climate change drivers, anticipating what could be our future by taking a look to mangrove changes, and third point, try to think about adaptive living based on mangrove behaviors. And I think it's my duty of a researcher based in French Guiana to try to develop a more general, more regional context of research with my colleagues of Brazil, Suriname, and Guyana. Really, so maybe Fabian will talk more about that, but I think it's really groundbreaking to go toward the regional mangrove observatory, because we live on a territorial continuity of coastal processes, and we have a lot of things to share all together. So below the slide, you have the research program network and also the local stakeholders involved in this program. So before to thank you, maybe you can read the question, the test. Anyone who will get the correct answer will win a boat tour in mangroves. Thank you.
Merci Christophe. Donc l'exposé suivant, c'est Morgana Tagliarolo qui va nous parler des caractérisations des habitats côtiers à la recherche de nurseries pour les poissons et les crustacés.
Hello everyone. So today I will talk you about the characterization of the nearshore habitats for nursery grounds for fish and shrimps. So this is a project that was funded by the lab CEBA and the Federal Biocode. So double funding. So just first of all, Christophe already told you a lot about mangroves, but they are not just important for mud, but they are also important for animals. They create a particular habitat where the shrimps and the fish, when they are very small, they are juvenile or larvae stages, they can hide and can find food to grow up. Some of them spend the entire life cycle in the estuaries and in the mangrove, but some others, like the Penaeus shrimps, like you can see in the drawing, they just grow up in the estuary in the mangrove, and after they move out at sea. And it's when they are adults, they have an important function as fisheries, such as they are one of the more important economic fishery in French Guiana. So the objective of our studies was to investigate the habitat preference for the early life stages of fish and shrimps, to understand the recruitment and the life cycle dynamics, and detect potential nursery hotspots around the coastline. And all of this was to provide management recommendation for the coast. 12 sampling sites was selected from Mana to Aprag estuary, and they were sampled both during the dry and the wet season. Several types of tools were employed to sample different habitats, because we cannot use the same tool to sample shallow areas and deeper ones. So we sample in the estuarine channel, in the smaller mangrove channel, and in the nearshore coastal areas. I will not go into detail, but several physicochemical and pollution parameters were measured both in the water and in the sediment. And 3 main compartments was selected. So there are fish and crustaceans that are in the juvenile or larvae stages, and the meiofauna. The meiofauna was also selected because it's the bottom of the food web, so it's important to characterize communities. So some of the results, I will not show you all of them because I have just 10 minutes, but some of the results is for shrimps. You can see that the orange dots here are bigger generally than the blue dots. So the species richness was higher during the dry season compared to the wet season. Just an exception was in the coastal, in the island of Connectable Island, where we had an inverse pattern. So for shrimps, we had different results for here the communities. So this is a multivariate plot, is exactly the same on the two, just the colors change. Basically here you have the blue, it's the wet season, and the red is the dry season. And you can see that they overlap, but not completely. And the corresponding sites name are here in the right. And you can see that the estuaries and mangrove that are in green and in purple, they have a higher seasonal variability. They are more spread around the graph than the coastal areas. The main driver explaining those community change are depth, phosphate concentration, and turbidity. We had a similar pattern for fish with higher species richness during the dry season, but was widely different between sites. Here was much bigger difference compared, for example, to the islands. And exactly the same type of graph that I showed you before show us that we have the same trend for fish with higher seasonal variability for the estuaries and mangroves that are in green and in purple. And the main driver was salinity, oxygen, phosphate, turbidity, and aluminum concentration in the sediment. So just to wrap up a little bit, so we had very important difference between habitats and between size, and the turbidity was one of the major drivers for all communities. So I show you just fish and shrimps, but was also the case for meiofauna. Seasonality was one of the predominant effects affecting both mangroves and estuarine habitats, and a little bit the coastal area that seems to be more stable around the year. And just to wrap up a little bit, I didn't talk you much about the commercial or important species for humans. So we found out that 22 fish that are eaten by local communities, they reproduce and they grow up in the estuaries and the mangroves, and 2 of the common shrimps that are also fish in French Guiana. So this is important to remember that those areas should be prioritized for conservation, not only for their biodiversity, but also because they are a spot where the recruitment grow up and they will supply the stocks that are out at sea. Thank you for your attention, and I would like to thank everybody that was part of the project and take those beautiful pictures for us.
Merci Morgana. Donc, je ne l'ai pas dit, tu es chercheuse à l'Ifremer et membre de l'UMR LEEISA. Voilà. Alors l'exposé suivant, c'est Fabian Blanchard, qui est également un chercheur à l'Ifremer, également membre du UMR LEEISA. et qui va nous parler de la création d'un observatoire des socio-écosystèmes côtiers en Guyane pour appréhender justement les fluctuations de la côte et puis les changements à venir globaux.
Good afternoon, everyone. So it is my pleasure to be here. I want to thank the organization for inviting me to present this project. So it is my pleasure to introduce you our project of Observatory of French Guiana coastal socio-ecosystem facing instability and global changes. So these projects are for some components of the socio-ecosystem yet in progress, and for other parts, this is still in progress. We have to build this, and so the advancement is not equally on all the parts, but this is the this is the context of our project. So the first deal with instability, and Christophe Proisy has very well spoken about instability, so I won't get into more details. It deals with the Amazonian influence, with the sediments that are brought in the coastal areas and also the unsalted waters. And so you have understand, I think, there is a migration of the mudbanks toward the northwest, and with colonization of mangrove. Moreover, we have very high seasonality in terms of the salinity of the waters, and these conditions, of course, the marine biodiversity that we can find here. Look, all this creates very high instability in the coastal area. And some other pictures to illustrate this, despite it has been illustrated quite well by Christophe Proisy. This is the picture of the city of Guyane, and you can see very well the coastline, and there is no mangrove, no mud bank in 2006. And then 6 years later, in 2012, sorry, we have a mud bank all around the city, and you can see the colonization by the mangrove. So there are some kind of cycles that creates very huge instabilities of the ecosystem, and of course of all the uses and economic exploitation that depends on this ecosystem. So this is the context of instability that we have to face, and we have also a context of long-term trends with the changes that can be due to climate change, of course, but also to demography. You can see here a projection of the population in French Guiana, and this work is done by INSEE. And as you can see, the projection of the number of population living here from 2013, and it is expected to double by 2050. So with this growth of population, of course, we will have a growth of all the pressures on the ecosystem, on the resources, and so on. Oh, there is one figure that is missing here. So you have to trust me. Here, this is a figure with a significant increase of the temperature of the sea surface in the French Guiana coastal waters. And this increase of temperature is significant, and we have observed changes in the groundfish community of the coastal shelf that can be due to this increase of sea surface, of sea temperatures. You have also here another indicator that are the mean sea level, and you can see also a significant increase of the mean sea level that can have an impact, of course, on the dynamic of migration of mangrove and before of mudbanks, of course. So this is the context that we have to face dealing with coastal socio-ecosystem. And our objectives are to understand better how this socio-ecosystem adapt to this short-term variability, to these changes. And then we can ask the question if this adaptation will allow will create resilience, the socio-ecosystem, facing the long-term changes. Okay, so this is our main objectives. The methods to do this is to implement long-term observations of two components. The first component is the socio-ecosystem, of course, and the socio-ecosystem is composed of various components, the habitats, the biodiversity, the uses and the perceptions of the actors compose the socio-ecosystem. But we have also to observe the associated forcing factors that influence these components of the socio-ecosystem. These forcing factors are the climate, oceanography, the Amazon discharge, human pressures, exploitation, and so on. So we have to look and to identify the respective evolution of these components, the interactions between these components, and then try to understand the determinism of this evolution regarding the forcing factors and can act on this component of the socio-ecosystems. So these are the components of the socio-ecosystem that we will take into account. You have on the right the component of the ecosystem, and this is our conceptual view of this ecosystem, of this socio-ecosystem, with the sediment dynamics process, biogeochemical fluxes, mangrove settlement structure and connectivity, and Christophe Proisy has speaks about this. The shrimp and fish community dynamics with the nursery recruitment stories that tell Morgana. And the other component, of course, of biodiversity, because biodiversity is not only fish and shrimps. And then you have the socioeconomic part of the socio-ecosystem with the increasing the uses, the exploitation, the infrastructures that are building up, the perceptions of the actor. So we have to better identify the mind processes of these different components, the interactions between these components, and the forcing factors that act on these various components. So, as you can understand, we won't study the socio-ecosystem on the whole coastline of French Guiana, too large. So we focus on a particular area, and that is this area. It is the Rivière de Cayenne. You can see the city of Cayenne here. And there are several reasons to have chosen this site. One of the reasons is that it is easy to access to this area because our laboratory is located here, so we can do high frequency observations. Another reason is because we have two kinds of mangrove. We have here a permanent mangrove, that is an estuarine mangrove, and we have here an area where the mangrove is unstable. So the two kinds of mangrove are represented in this area. And also another reason is that this site concentrates several stakes that we can identify. One here is, the number one is around the commune de Macouria. It is a town where we can observe a growth of the population with more and more urban development and some pressures, of course, on this site, Rivière de Monsignery and estuaire de la Rivière de Cayenne. We have here, second, it is constructions, sites where a bridge is under construction between the two parts of the continent. And we have also an EDF power station under construction on the mangrove area here. So this power station is stopped for the moment, but it will go on or not, we don't know. Well, anyway, other stakes is that this site is also a place where there are recreational activities in terms of fishing, crabs, fish, mangrove oysters, and so on. We have also professional fishing here with a permanent fixed fishing device that we call barrière chinoise. And we have also here the main landing point of the coastal fisheries that brings the products for the local consumptions. And finally, we have here, as I was saying previously, a mud bank is arriving and it will be colonized by the mangrove. So we will be just here to observe this in real time. So data collection will be done through in situ observation in the estuary, and we will have access with dedicated boats. We have here a brand new boat that we baptized this year, funded by IFROMER, CNRS, la Préfecture de Guyane. It will allow us to make high frequency measurement of tides, currents, turbidity, salinity, oxygen, and so on. In situ observation on the littoral mud bank through a floating pontoon that we have installed here, and we have a private access to do all the observations. And also, we implement socio-economic surveys, anthropological interviews with local actors about the uses, the exploitation, their perception, and so on. Also, participatory workshops with the stakeholders. And we have also the fisheries observing system of IFROMER that will allow us to have a quite fine knowledge of the fishing, the professional fishing activities of the area. So I will end with more perspective on this project. We want to extend this observatory to the whole coastal area. In fact, of course, with some focus in some case study. So this is the case study we are on which we are working now. But we probably will have other case study with other stakes. And we want to build a site d'étude en écologie globale, that is a CNRS tool that will allow to go then on a next step to a zone atelier. The zone atelier will allow to mobilize a multidisciplinary academic community as well as stakeholder communities for a collaborative approach. And you can see here our kind of view of this partnership with here a first circle of the science partner, with of course the LEEISA and other research units that yet work with us, especially in the context of the GDR Liga, and of course local stakeholders that you can see in green in another circle with local collectivities, NGOs, Comité des Pêches, and so on. So I will stop now. So if you have questions, and just for illustration, this is a fixed fisheries device in the estuary de la rivière de Cayenne. It is a barrière chinoise. Thank you. Sorry for the question.